Hello, Earthlings. How are you all doing after this amazing Thanksgiving weekend? We are here and we're going to go down a time travel journey where I'm going to discuss my experience with watching my mother, who was a 30-year-long Church of Scientology Scientologist, and her transition after she was declared into the independent Scientology movement, and whether I think the independent Scientology movement was beneficial. Now, this is not going to be like a Chris Shelton YouTube video about the independent Scientology movement where he gets paid $500 from Karen and Jeff to make a propaganda video of how the independent Scientology movement is wonderful. And Chris Shelton, quite frankly, I don't think really knows too much about the independent Scientology movement. But as usual, just like he acts like he has a degree, he enjoys acting like he knows a lot about everything. He's the world's leading expert on police brutality against the African American community. He's the world's leading expert on psychotropic medications, although he has never taken any. And he's also the world's leading expert on independent Scientology, although he's not very minimally been involved in it, if at all. So thank you. Thank you for being here. So this is going to be a little bit different. And you know what you people need to realize is that although I was born and raised in Scientology, like I say many times, there are some of us that are hybrid second gens where we had Scientology hardcore, like shoved in our faces. My parents were Scientologists before I was born. That's how like hardcore of a second gen I am, because I wasn't even born into it. I wasn't like 8 years old. I was in utero. I was in my mother's womb, and they were already doing Scientology 3 years before I even was conceived. And for people who don't know what in utero means, it means in the womb. It also was the title of Nirvana's last studio album before Kurt Cobain untimely left the building. Check it out, In Utero by Nirvana. It's one of the greatest albums ever created or produced, in my opinion. So this is going to be a unbiased outlook of the independent Scientology movement, what it was like witnessing my mother get declared after 30 years and go into the independent Scientology movement, and if I think it was a good thing or not. Now, surprisingly, there are some good things I can say, but then there's some negative things. Not about the independent movement as a whole, but just as a daughter having to see this. This is going to be my perspective of my outlook and what I witnessed. With my mom spending about a decade in. And for those of you long timers, my mom's on that Indy 500 list. Yeah, I got the street cred, man. I got the street cred to talk about the indie movement. You guys know I'm just kind of kidding and being sarcastic. Some of you watching this, I have a very sardonic humor, and I always have. And I enjoy laughing. I enjoy comedy. And I've heard from people that comedy is a way to cover up trauma, or always cracking jokes and laughing at everything is a form of handling trauma. I don't know if that's true or not, but if you listen to comedians, you know, like Dave Chappelle, Jim Carrey, like all of the world's greatest comics throughout history, and you read their biographies, they all have suffered a lot of trauma, and their way of dealing with it was laughing. I think it is a coping mechanism. But I can't say if that's why I find humor in some of this. I don't know if it's a trauma reaction or if I just naturally have a bizarre sense of humor, because I have always enjoyed humor and jokes. I always have. And I have to stop saying. I was reading Jerry Armstrong's transcript, and for you Jerry Armstrong fans, you can send this to him, because I didn't realize that he made a thank you for me, and I did email him. Jerry, check your emails if you haven't. But he put my transcript of what I was saying, and I was reading it, and I'm like, good Lord, do I really talk like, do I sound like this much of a moron? It's entirely different reading your words after you do a video versus me listening to myself. And I was reading the transcript, and I'm like, blah, 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 and I'm like, holy moly. But they teach you that. I did take Communication 101 in college many years ago, and yeah, you're not supposed to say things like, blah, 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 because you sort of sound like Beavis and Butthead. Now, reading that, I realized, like, I kind of sound like Beavis and Butthead. But I'm going to try to make this as least Beavis and Butthead sounding as possible, if I can help it. And again, thank you guys. Before I get into the independent Scientology part, there's a couple of house cleaning items that I always do. One of those house cleaning items is, and I really hate to say this, but I have to. I would not feel right if I stayed silent, and I'm one of those people where when I have been friends with someone for a very long time, like as in a decade or more in this anti-Scientology movement, I'm not the person that you want to have problems with when you just come along a year ago and pop up and want to act like you've been a great friend of one of my personal friends that I've known for over a decade, and then you start kind of doing stalker creepy things of sending mass emails, telling people, like giving them orders because you're a delusionally obsessed fan. So there is a cult groupie alert that I would like to announce. She's using the name Courtney as her first name and various last names. I'm not going to disclose those last names. I do believe it's the same Courtney I had to unfriend on my Facebook recently because she began going down this rabbit hole of Mike Rinder and how she's been following Mike Rinder and has been a great friend of his for decades. Not decade, decades with an S. And I could tell her age. I'm 46. She looks like my age bracket, possibly a little bit younger. She's also currently sending emails to people claiming to be Doug's friend, personal and close friend of years, and telling people, I don't like what you are saying about Doug. I want you to stop. And Marilyn is one of those people. And I know for a fact Doug was very good friends with Marilyn, and he really liked Marilyn a lot. Marilyn is my friend. She's someone that I have came to know with her story, and although her story differs, and she might have a different style, because you have to take a look at it, man. Like the Christian cult people, they're totally different than ex-Scientology people. And I've explained this to Marilyn, and she, like, they're more expressive, they're more emotional, they tend to just, cry a lot and do things which is healthy, which is actually what we should be doing, whereas us ex-Scientologists are non-emotional, non-dramatic. When we do make our videos, we're usually yelling and being like F you and you did this and that. It's just a different style. It's a different cultural mindset, if that makes sense. But I deeply, I love Marilyn. She knows that as a friend. I don't care what anyone says that doesn't like her. You guys don't like her because you're not listening. Doug really liked Marilyn. That's why he did several interviews and talked to her all the time. And he personally told me and Doug personally were always having Marilyn's back about everything. So this Courtney person that's using various last names is emailing people and saying, Doug Scott Kramer did this, did that. Doug Scott Kramer, and this is what this is where I have to intervene, is when people start saying things of like, Doug would be ashamed of what you're doing. Doug would not like, and this is a person that barely popped up. That's just a obsessed, and this is why me and Doug always would use the word cult groupies. It's an obsessed cult groupie that's having a break from reality and thinks that she honestly was Doug's friend for many, many years. Courtney, if you're listening to this and if you have a problem with Marilyn or I discussing Doug, message me. Send me a message on Facebook. Can send me a message here. I'd like to talk to you. I'd like to talk to you and kind of give you a burst of harsh reality. So this Courtney person, so far, she is a lawyer for the P. Diddy case. She's a criminologist. She's known Mike Rinder forever. She's been Doug Kramer's friend forever, and she's been fighting anti-Scientology stuff for decades, which means she must have been joining this movement at 2 years old, according to her. So if any of you out there get a message from a Courtney, ignore it and throw it away. The only way you can handle delusional cult groupies like that is you have to disengage. Disengaging is not disconnection, and once again, disconnection is a policy that you will only receive if you are a member of the Church of Scientology. If you're not a member of the Church of Scientology, you will never have to deal with disconnection. It's that simple. It's no different from Jehovah's Witnesses and how they're shunned. So if someone decides to stop talking to you, you're not being shunned and you're not being disconnected, because those are religious orders. Cult orders. However, you guys, some people say religious, some people say it's a cult. I do understand Scientology is a cult. When it gets into the cults that believe in Jesus, that's just beyond my scope of expertise and not something that I can really speak upon. So that's what you all have Marilyn for, because she can speak about that stuff. To wrap that up, Doug, if he was a friend of yours, it was just Doug. It was not Doug Scott Kramer. Okay? He is an amazing man. He still is. But he didn't like the whole, the name like Henry David Thoreau. The whole Doug Scott Kramer. There's only one person that gets a free pass on using that name. You know who that is? That's that narcissist guy. What's his name? H.G. Tudor. H.G. Tudor, I think, was the first one to say, my tribute to Doug Scott Kramer. Because H.G. Tudor, first of all, was not an obsessed cult groupie that delusionally imagined that Doug is his romantic partner. H.G. Tudor is a very rational, logically minded individual. I don't get into the narcissism stuff, but he explains things very thoroughly detailed. I can tell he's a highly intelligent individual. Plus his, English accent, whether it's AI generated or not, I don't know. If it is, it sounds great. So when H.G. Tudor says Doug Scott Kramer, that's awesome, because it kind of adds like the classy allure to it. But those of us that were friends with Doug If you were a friend of Doug, man, his name was Doug. It was not Doug Scott Kramer. Doug would actually be very weirded out by the fact that there are certain people doing this to him, because Doug, like myself, we did not like people stalking us and being invasive and encroaching upon us and worshiping us in doing the whole cult groupie thing. Doug hated that. He has said that. He's made that abundantly clear in numerous videos of his. And also, if you're making videos releasing phone calls with Doug, my question is, why the fuck were you recording your phone calls with him to begin with? That's straight up psycho, stalker, creepy shit. And I can tell you, if Doug knew that his conversations were being secretly recorded as he's thinking he's having a just normal conversation, he would not like that at all. And you people doing that would be blocked and ostracized from his life for good. So think about that. Why are you recording phone calls and hanging on to them? I've never done that to one person in my life. I mean, my brain can't even comprehend why someone would do that. It's insane. Like I said, it's Taylor Swift level stalking and obsession that some of you folks have. You got to get a grip. You got to get a reality grip. That's all I'm going to say. And if you guys get those emails going around from this Courtney person, ignore it, or you can contact me about it and let me know, because I'm pretty good at handling those situations. And being that people are like, oh, appeal to authority. I had to say the other day, man, when you've been around this movement for 18 to 20 years and you've seen who has came and gone and what happens, and you know the demographic, and plus you were born and raised in Scientology, we naturally are going to be authorities. It's no different than going into a Islam forum with a bunch of people that were raised in Islam. Now, would you cult groupies go in an Islamic forum and start telling everyone they don't know what the hell they're talking about? Is you guys know more about Islam because you watched one National Geographic episode about it? Nah, you guys wouldn't do that. Because you know you would get clowned and ridiculed and extremely, publicly humiliated into oblivion. So this is not appeal to authority. It's, we were born and raised in Scientology. We're obviously naturally going to know a hell of a lot more about it than people who were not. It's not an easy belief system to understand. It's not something where you just look up words and do a Google search and think, oh, I know what PTS means. No. To understand what these words mean in Scientology, you actually have to be a part of it. You have to write the word 3 times in a sentence, do clay demos, do that. You have to know it. So for those of you that are very interested in knowing what these words mean, I have a recommendation. Stop the stupidity and just go join the Church of Scientology. For you folks doing this, go join it. Have them word clear you on the words that you want to understand. Do clay demos. Look up the Latin derivation of like PTS, for example, or potential. You'd have to look up the Latin derivation for potential, look up the Latin derivation for trouble, look up the Latin derivation for source, put it all together, read L. Ron Hubbard's definition of it, write 3 sentences, do a clay demo. You're only going to get that treatment if you join the Church of Scientology. Then you can officially say you know what those words mean. So for those of you that really, really want to do that, just go join the damn cult. Okay? Because until then, you're acting like posers that don't really know what the hell you're talking about. That's it. I'll leave that part alone. Now, as far as the independent Scientology aspect I was going to discuss, I've described previously how my mother was a Scientologist for 30 years in the actual Church of Scientology. They joined in 75. I was born in 78. So around, I think it was 2005, 2006, David Miscavige had taken over, and a lot of old school Scientologists were not happy about it at all, mainly because of Miscavige implementing the golden age of tech, where Miscavige said, hey, we found all of this stuff that L. Ron Hubbard wrote. Basically, he wanted to just modernize the sound quality of L. Ron Hubbard's tapes, because you have to think 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and then versus, the new sound technology of the 90s and the 2000s. So Miscavige, he found stuff, put new shit in L. Ron Hubbard's courses and books. He sort of like sanitized it a little bit, which, hey, depending on how you look at it, maybe he needed to do that. Like right now, how they're sanitizing Scientology, the Church of Scientology, and saying things like gays are accepted, they don't discriminate against gay people. It doesn't matter if you've done LSD. I don't know, I'm not familiar with their psych med policy of today, but you get my point. David Miscavige has to do these things to seem like an accepting religion, now that Scientology is kind of a religion according to the United States government. So my mother was on Free Zone talking openly about David Miscavige, how much he sucks, and she started kind of getting into the independent Scientology movement, and OSA, they intercepted a bunch of emails from high-level SPs like Marty Rathburn, Tommy Thompson, Mike Rinder. This is 06, 07 level, where they all were like jumping to the Free Zone movement to continue practicing L. Ron Hubbard, but without David Miscavige being involved. Now, my mom was using her first and real name on Free Zone. Of course, OSA, after intercepting Marty and all these other SP's emails, they kept seeing my mom's name pop up. Like, who is this lady emailing Marty and Tommy Thompson asking questions? And she's the same lady on the Free Zone saying what a piece of crap David Miscavige is. And then they discovered my mother was the mother of the executive director of the Phoenix Org, my half-sister. So, yeah, it's kind of a big deal. It's a little bit of a big deal. If my sister was not the executive director, probably wouldn't have gone down the same way. When you're the executive director is the highest position you can have in the Church of Scientology. So they gave my mother an ultimatum. She had to do an amends project. They put her in a condition of danger, which is one of the worst. I had to do a condition of liability formula, and that was bad enough. My condition of liability formula was for just being a teenage pot smoker. Good Lord, can you imagine? I don't know if Liz Gale has ever had to do a liability formula for smoking weed at like 16, 17 years old. It's the funniest, most interesting experience, because you have to go through the whole A&E steps. And the worst part was where I had to write up every OW in my entire freaking life, which took 3 days. That's no joke, man. Once they tell you, you have to write up every overt and withhold in your life. And then they break your life up into 8 segments, the 8 dynamics. So I had to write up my overts against my first dynamic, which includes masturbation, second dynamic, blah, blah, blah. Oh, yeah. It was like a 3-day long process. When you're put in a condition of liability like my mother, condition of danger. Because danger is basically where they're like, you're on the edge of us kicking your ass out. Well, she refused to do the condition of danger. There's danger and treason and the liability formulas. But she said, no, I'm not going to stop posting on the internet and expressing myself. So they did. They kicked her out, and they gave her declare notice on Christmas Eve. They came to our house. I was here. Merry Christmas, Scientology style. Here's your declare notice. After staying in Scientology for 30 years, Merry Christmas, bye-bye. So then PIs were coming to my parents' house, looking through their garbage. I saw that. We were kind of laughing, like, what are these guys thinking they're going to find? Like leftover Taco Bell and, like, I don't know, burrito wrappings and stuff. I mean, because back then there was really no high level shit being mailed back in 2006, like Scientology stuff. So I did witness the PIs. I could tell that my mother took it very hard and personal because that was her group for 30 years. And she immediately went to Free Zone and became an independent Scientologist. She was primarily reading Mike Rinder and Marty Rathbun's blogs. I'm always just going to say Rathburn. I know it's Rathbun, but dude, it's Rathburn to me because I feel weird saying Rathburn. Rathbun. It just doesn't sound right. So she was following their blogs and they were the crusaders. There was a massive exodus of people like that back then, like my mom. I mean, shit, Marty and Rinder themselves were a part of that exodus of Church of Scientology members leaving the church and then going on to establish their own independent movement where they could practice Scientology freely the way L. Ron Hubbard intended it to be. She tried getting me involved in Free Zone and independent Scientology, but I've always been against L. Ron Hubbard. I experienced an L. Ron Hubbard upbringing. I didn't really experience a David Miscavige upbringing. I kind of did a little bit, with his bullshit events where he's like, Scientology is the #1 fastest growing religion in the world, and Dianetics is the #1 bookseller in Afghanistan, right after 9/11. Yeah, Miscavige, I'm sure the Taliban is just buying Dianetics by the millions. I'll never forget that event for various reasons. But I would see my mom glued to her internet just reading their blogs and staying ingrained and thinking that L. Ron Hubbard is amazing and great. And it wasn't really helping her. I think it was keeping her further entrapped. And that's the story you might not hear from other people. Now, I'm not saying independent Scientology is necessarily evil, because just like the the second gen movement, you know how there's different factions with us? There's the second gens that love SPTV. There's the second gens that don't. There's the second gens that stay quiet. There's probably 7 different mindsets within the second gen community. The independent Scientology community works very similarly. So you have what I call the legitimate independent Scientologists, like the head honchos, like Trey Lotz, for example, although I don't know why he went on peeling the onion, but I don't think he knows any better. I'll give him a little pass. Those dudes, they keep to themselves. They do not audit children. They just like auditing each other. All of the old school Scientologists that have been involved since the 60s and 70s. My attitude is, you guys are adults. If you want to secretly audit each other and you think it's amazing, jam out with your clam out, man. Just keep that shit away from the kids. Then you have a section of independent Scientologists who, and this is my favorite one, they follow L. Ron Hubbard reincarnated, or LRH 2.0, which is the dude that came out and claimed to be L. Ron Hubbard. And he's quite an interesting character. I remember talking to him on the phone once. He sounds just like L. Ron Hubbard too. It's crazy, like his voice. And I will give that guy credit. He learned how to audit and study the whole bridge and audit people. Now, to be a street criminal and be that criminally intelligent to look at and say, you know what? These people are waiting for their leader to come back, and these people pay a shitload of money to receive information and auditing from their leader, I'm going to do this. That takes some criminal savvy to do that. And I used to think, a couple years before L. Ron Hubbard Reincarnated came out, I used to think in my mind as a funny joke and say, this independent Scientology movement is a gold mine because it's a money-based cult. They're waiting for their leader to come back to charge them more money for services. And if someone out there gets that idea to come back as the leader to start charging money, that's going to be like the best, I don't know, kind of, I'm not saying I agree with it, but you have to admit it's pretty criminally genius. Plus the dude knows how to audit like up to the OT levels. So that's what this L. Ron Hubbard Reincarnated guy did. He's still around. He's currently incarcerated. He probably gets a few $1,000s a month from his devoted fans. And honestly, I would rather see someone like L. Ron Hubbard Reincarnated because he actually knows his bridge, he knows the definitions, and he knows his shit. The amount of time it takes to learn that stuff as just being like a petty criminal, and that guy was never in Scientology. Dude, you people, cult groupies, be like L. Ron Hubbard Reincarnated. Study Scientology, learn your shit, and learn what it actually is. Get on the level of L. Ron Hubbard Reincarnated. Then start making videos with your in-depth knowledge of it. Because whether people like L. Ron Hubbard Reincarnated or not, the dude knows Scientology. So I'm gonna give a Xenu Marlene to L. Ron Hubbard Reincarnated for being able to learn all that fucking insanity in such a short period of time. That's phenomenal. So my mom didn't get into the L. Ron Hubbard Reincarnated stuff though. But I didn't see it helping her, staying ingrained in Scientology. And I'll give you an example. My mother and I, we don't really have the greatest, it's not a horrible relationship, but Scientology and her raising me in it from before I was born, when I was in her tummy, it's put a little damper on it because, as you hear Serge say repeatedly, there's this accountability thing. And my mother did apologize to me once in my 20s, and everything was cool. I'm like, hey, it's all good. We make mistakes, get involved in shit. You and my father grew up in the Bay Area during the 70s where that was like a gold mine of alternative belief systems. So I kind of understand in a weird way. I don't hate her, I don't dislike her, but it angers me because I have to tell her constantly, like, trigger words, that Scientology words that she uses nonstop to this very day that she will not stop using. And the other day, my mother, she asked me what I knew about schizophrenia. And she's like, yeah, I just want to know. She's like, what causes it? Is it something you're born with? Is it this and that? Because we have someone in our, personal space that has schizophrenia. And I said, Mom, there's no point in me talking to you about this because you don't believe in mental illness, for one. And number two, you don't believe in the human brain and that the brain does anything. So by me explaining schizophrenia and what I know, because I know there's not really an answer or a scientifically proven cause of schizophrenia, there isn't one as of yet. There's theories. There's not an official, like, this is what causes schizophrenia. And I'm not sure if there ever will be. So, and I'm one of those people at my age where I don't like explaining shit to people if it's something I already know that they don't believe in, and it's just going to be a waste of time for both of us. So my mom says, no, I do believe about the brain. And I said, okay, do you believe that the brain controls, there's neurons, dendrites, and our brain controls all of our cellular structure and pretty much every system in our body, our endocrine system, our digestive system. I mean, uh, everything, even certain parts of our emotions. I said, do you believe that our brain can do that? Or do you think it's just a piece of meat in your body that does nothing? She told me, oh, I believe in the brain. So I start explaining to her what I know about schizophrenia. And then it got into like psychology and the godfathers of psychology, like Sigmund Freud, Carl Jung, Pavlov, all of those. And I said, yeah, L. Ron Hubbard basically stole a lot of his stuff from the godfathers of psychology while acting like he's against psychology. And my mom says, no, L. Ron Hubbard copied Eastern philosophy. And I said, no, Mom, he tried to copy Eastern philosophy and did a bastardized, bang up job of it. I'm like, if you read authentic Buddhist literature, I'm like, how did L. Ron Hubbard copy Eastern philosophy? Like that Hymn of Asia book? If you guys have read that, that's like the little novel poem that L. Ron Hubbard wrote about himself where he claims to be like the next Buddha. The more I think about L. Ron Hubbard, I'm like, good Lord, that dude. L. Ron Hubbard was like nuttier than shit. That dude was a freaking whack job. Seriously. He's up there with like the leader of the Heaven's Gate cult and how loony that dude was. L. Ron Hubbard was just as loony as the Heaven's Gate cult member. Marshall Applewhite, something like that. So, anyways, mine and my mother's conversation did not end up too well because we started arguing within 5 minutes. I'm like, this is what I told you, Mom. We can't have these conversations because you don't believe in mental illness, you don't believe in the brain, and you still think L. Ron Hubbard was a great man who did. My mom to this day considers herself a lifetime student of L. Ron Hubbard, and she's proud of it. That's what I have to deal with. She's proud of that fact. If I say, you know what, can you just come right out and say L. Ron Hubbard was a fraud? She won't do it. She will not do it. And most independent Scientologists will not. Which, at this point, I can understand, but a part of me, it's very frustrating because I'm like, it's been proven time and time again that he was a fraud and he did all this stuff. And the fact that people can't admit that, like 20, 30 years after being kicked out of the actual Church of Scientology, it's beyond me. And then when I bring up, well, L. Ron Hubbard created disconnection, fair game. What else? L. Ron Hubbard created OSA. He created the Operations of Special Affairs. L. Ron Hubbard created the anti-gay, or I should say gay hatred in Scientology. He created the policies that children are adults in little tiny bodies. He created overboarding. He created, you guys, I could go on and on and on with his South African, anti-South African, and Africans in general are they're subpar. They're the inferior species according to L. Ron Hubbard. He created all that, not David Miscavige. So, yeah, it's a little bit challenging seeing my mom still entrapped in this thinking. It really is. But at her age, she's in her 70s, and I'm like, man, she spent 30 years in, technically 50, because she still believes in the garbage, but just L. Ron Hubbard stuff. I'm like, there's nothing I can do at this point. She's just going to be one of those lifelong believers, and the insanity that ensued with that and my upbringing, now that I'm a little bit older in my 40s, I've learned to come to terms with it, and I just have to accept it as a very annoying part of my family life that I'm never going to eradicate as far as that belief system. But a lot of her ways of thinking has to do with being involved in the free zone and independent movement, because it kept her ingrained and entrapped with thinking of L. Ron Hubbard being the source and that he's still a great guy. And she believes that the CIA killed him. She thinks she's one of those that thinks it was like a total CIA operation, and the psychs got a hold of him and injected him with Visceral, which I believe I said in a previous video. Man, I have like 2 prescriptions of Visceral. I don't take it very often unless if I'm having an allergy attack, because it's primarily used as an antihistamine these days. And they'll give you Visceral as a first line, medication for anxiety, which doesn't do jack shit for anxiety. It just makes you sleep. Anxiety pills like Valiums, clonazepams, they don't do that to you. They literally get rid of your anxiety. And how do I know? Because I've been on clonazepam for 5 years. Oh yes, indeedly do. So, yeah, big difference between the two. And for those of you that are like, oh my god, she takes clonazepam. Yeah, I'm a very hypervigilant person if I don't take it, and I can't sleep for two days straight. So, kind of helps me chill out a little bit. So sometimes modern medicine, it's actually a good thing. But yeah, I am remembering my mother's independent Scientology expenditure, her experience. Has it helped her? Has it helped her become a better person, a freer person, like freeing her shackles from the mind of Scientology? And has it allowed her to be able to not be so Scientology-ish with L. Ron Hubbard? Nope, not at all. It has not helped her at all. Now, she's always been a huge kind of cult hopper mentality. She's always looking up Indian gurus, spiritual gurus, Caribbean gurus, which some of her stuff, I'll admit, is pretty interesting, because she looks up and then finds out the strangest people I've never even heard of, like remote viewing, aliens. I can go on and on. That's my mom, and I love her. She's always been like a seeker. She's always been a seeker. She's just, that song, Looking for Love in All the Wrong Places? My mom is sort of like looking for cults, but all the wrong places. Should make a song. Looking for cults in all the wrong places, looking for cults. If anyone wants to do that, a rendition of that, I would love to see the end product. But I see her now older, and I wish for that time where I'm like, man, I just wish my mother could completely free her mind from Scientology indoctrination and L. Ron Hubbard indoctrination once and for all. But it's not going to happen. I know it's not. And it's kind of a crappy feeling, because it holds her back from so much. She thinks that any medical or mental health advancement, she doesn't even know about any of it, because she still has that mindset that mental health and mental illness is non-existent. It's a fabricated, invented term by our medical establishment, according to her, and that's what Scientology teaches people. Can't emphasize it as much. There's no such thing as mental health in Scientology. It does not exist. Depression, anxiety, bipolar, OCD, ADD. You don't hear about that shit in Scientology. And that's why when I began my therapeutic journey, I saw a psychiatrist instead of a psychologist. because we are trained to believe that psychiatrists are, I guess, the equivalent of the Antichrist. We have to be deathly afraid of them. They're out to kill everyone. They're out to destroy everyone's minds. And so I saw a psychiatrist. It's that whole thing, like when people are afraid of snakes and they put snakes over themselves, and it's that therapy of being confronted with that which you're afraid of about. So I decided to see a psychiatrist for that very reason. And I also decided to dabble in pretty much every psychotropic medication that's readily available. SSRIs, SNRIs, MDRIs, then you get into the benzos, even stuff like Adderall. I'm a bit of a psychonaut, and I know I'm mentally capable of being able to handle things like that without it screwing me up, because I have a 30-year history of exploring the depths of my mind with different substances. So that was the route I went. I wanted to see what everything did and how it affects my brain. Usually make sure I took half the dose of what was prescribed to me, just to err on the side of caution. But my mom will not see a therapist. She won't see a psychiatrist, but she's constantly telling people they need to see therapists and psychiatrists. And I'm like, Mom, why don't you see one? Just to face one and realize, like, because that's half the battle of overcoming your fear in Scientology, is realizing there is a mental aspect to us and our psyche and our emotions. Emotions are normal. In Scientology, emotions are looked at as abnormal. If you're sad, you're angry, or stressed, in Scientology, that means you're PTS or something's wrong with you and you need auditing, and they have to figure it out. I will never forget the very first time I suffered a huge panic attack. I was like 21. I was with my mom, and I felt like I was dying. It was exactly like, literally, Michael, Serge's husband, when he was in the hospital. It felt like that. Like I was hyperventilating. I couldn't breathe. My whole body was numb and tingly. I thought I was having a stroke. And I told my mom, I'm like, please take me to the hospital. I don't know what's going on with me. Like, I thought I was going to die. That's how bad it was. And my mom says, let's go do a locational. That was, the first time I had a huge high-level panic attack. I got to have it handled by doing a locational and going outside and looking at the trees. And panic attacks go away naturally on their own. If you have one that lasts 15, 20 minutes, that's kind of like a big one. So by me going outside for 20 minutes, I kind of started feeling back to normal, but I would have felt back to normal anyways without doing a locational and looking at trees. But then after that, I started to develop panic attacks regularly, like 2 to 3 times a month. And my mom would want me to do vitamin C, this and that. I'm already in my early 20s. I'm like, fuck that. I'm not doing that shit. I'm not doing locationals and Scientology stuff. Eventually I was prescribed anti-anxiety meds. I had to do it on my own. This was later, a few years later. I had to tough this shit out for a few years because I didn't know any better. So I guess my point is, I know, again, this is a little bit of a mishmash of everything, but I wanted to give you guys a general idea of my thoughts about the independent Scientology movement. Do I think it has helped my mother? People refer to the independent Scientology movement as a stepping stone, which I think works for some people. I have known some people that jumped to the independent movement, spent a few years in it, and then realized, you know what, this is batshit nuts too. Scientology sucks. So those people, it does work. people like my mom, and I think the folks that have spent 30 years in it, getting involved with independent Scientology, I look at it similarly to a heroin addict that gets put on a methadone program. I think that's the perfect analogy. So you're no longer taking heroin, but you're now on methadone, which gets you just as hooked as the heroin did, but now you're on something else. And if you try to stop taking that, it doesn't usually go down too well. That's the unadulterated, however you prefer to say it. That's the unbiased viewpoint of the independent Scientology movement I can think of. No, I do not think it helped my mother. I do not think it was a stepping stone. In fact, I think it caused her greater mental damage by keeping her entrapped with L. Ron Hubbard's abusive policies. And L. Ron Hubbard's abusive policies are a large reason why she and I will most likely never have a decent relationship with each other, which truly upsets me because there was a time my mother and I were very close. But I can't be as close with her where every time I open my mouth, she starts telling me what a great human being L. Ron Hubbard was to this very day. That's one of those things where I can't be like, okay, Mom, yeah, I absolutely agree with you. So, yeah. The independent Scientology movement, I would say, actually has kind of caused irreparable damage to my and my mother's relationship of being able to progress and move forward without being indoctrinated by Scientology. I completely lost all of my Scientology indoctrination. Once again, it's been 22 years since I've had anything to do with Scientology. I think I was about 21 or 22 when I started seeking out my own adventure of what's going to work for me spiritually. And again, I went through public schools, and so I have half of my mind that was indoctrinated with Scientology, and the other half of my mind that was indoctrinated with normal society. So, yeah, I'm like a hybrid second gen. I know how to talk about all the fucked up things in normal society, and I know how to talk about all the fucked up things in Scientology. So I think that's it for now. And yeah, just be on the lookout in the next week or two if you guys see some weird kind of cult groupie activity going on. It's par for the course. I knew this was going to happen. And again, if you get emails and messages from people like that, disengage immediately, because you can't talk rationally to those people. They are in a fantasy world in their minds. Any person that thinks they are a P. Diddy lawyer, a criminologist, best friends with Mike Rinder, best friends with Doug Scott Kramer, Henry David Thoreau, like I said, we all just knew him as Doug, and you get messages from someone like that, disengage. So thank you all for listening, as L. Ron Hubbard says. Thank you all for listening, and I'll see you next time.